Let's talk about the third way that we can control the exposure. We can control how bright our picture is, and that is the sensitivity of the camera. And this particular camera is measured in a setting called ISO. Now, ISO is actually an archaic term, but then again, so is shutter speed. So we're not going to let that bother us. But what ISO talks about is how aggressively the sensor inside the camera reacts to light. So if it's set at a low setting, like ISO 100 is the lowest setting that this camera will go, you need a lot of light to get a good picture. ISO 100 is fantastic if you're running around in the tropics on a sunshiny day. So if you're outside in Hawaii and the sun's up, ISO 100 is a great place to start. As these numbers get faster, the camera gets more sensitive to light, and effectively it makes things brighter. And again, we measure this in stops by multiplying and dividing by 2. So from ISO 100, we go to ISO 200 to ISO 400, and so on. And every time it gets one stop brighter, every time twice as much light or twice as much brightness is recorded by the sensor. Now, this particular camera will go up as high as ISO 25,600. So you can take a picture in a really low light environment, perhaps maybe a picture of the stars at night. This comes at a cost, though. As the ISO gets higher and higher, the quality of the image suffers. We call this noise, right? So you get more noise in the picture, and it kind of looks like little dots. Sometimes people will call it snow. But anyway, so if we take a look at this, now to change the ISO, so if you look at my display here, right now it's set for an ISO of 1600, which is, for where I am, not a bad setting. I'm in a very dark room, although I've got a couple of lights pointed at me. But let's take a look at what we would do. So this means we're going to have to go into a menu. Now, we don't have to use the menu button. We could do it that way, but this is a great opportunity for that little I button. I think of it as like this, the tiny menu. But when I push that, it's going to open up this little tiny menu. And again, the last time we looked at this, the camera was set to automatic, so only a few things worked. But now we have the camera set to manual. So you can see as I step through here that there are quite a few of these. There's about a dozen options, and I can get to almost all of them but one actually. But I'm interested in the ISO, so I'm going to go with ISO and click that. And you see I've got a little picking thing here. And it even has photographs. It has little thumbnails to tell you what it's good for. So if I go down to ISO 100, right, that's a picture of a waterfall outside. ISO 200, again, we're outside. ISO 400, it's a little overcast. You know, we have a person sitting in the shade. ISO 800, they've got for, what is that, a landscape. 1600, we're in a concert hall, somebody sitting at a piano. 3200, that's an evening picture. 6400, sports. 12,800 and 25,600 are both pictures at nighttime. So this gives you an idea of the range this thing can do. Now again, these high numbers, 6,400 and higher, you really will start to see a degradation of the picture. So if you have a choice, don't do that. But if you don't have a choice, I mean, a lower quality picture is better than no picture at all, right? So if you're in a very dark space and you can't use a flash, you don't have any other lighting, yeah, sometimes you just have to run the ISO up. Now I'm going to run this down to, I'm going to pick 400 for the moment, because I'm going to set up to take a picture here where I've got lots of light. And I've got a box of Sharpies and an empty coffee cup. This is going to be my still life. All right, I'm going to set this here where the light's falling on it. Okay. And then what I want to do, let me show you what I'm seeing through the viewfinder here. All right, so this is the picture I'm going to try to take. Look at how stylish that is. Okay. Now let me go back to the menu here. Now at the moment you can see my settings are going from left to right. My shutter speed is at 1/2500th of a second. That's a very fast shutter speed. I'm at f7.1, which is relatively closed, but not all the way down, and ISO of 400. I feel like the ISO of 400 is probably okay for the amount of light that's in here, but that shutter speed is ridiculously fast. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use my little adjustment wheel. I've got a problem here in that my camera, my close-up spot, and my Still I for too close together. But I am going to run that down to about, well, let's just try a 500th of a second here. All right, let me come back out here and get my framing back. Okay, so if I look at the screen underneath the where the f-stop indicator is, you can see there's a little display, a little meter there. That's telling me the brightness of my picture, and you can see that there's kind of a series of dashes and an arrow pointing off to the left, telling me my picture is very underexposed. So I'm going to keep slowing that shutter speed down. Oh, and look down. I get down to like 1/100th of a second, 1/80th of a second, 1/60th of a second. You can see that that line is moving towards center. And by the time I get down to 1/30th of a second, I've made it to center. The camera thinks this is properly exposed. It's neither overexposed nor underexposed. Okay, I could try to take this picture, but I'm worried about 1/30th of a second. That's a slow shutter speed, and my hands are very shaky. So even though I'm propped on a table, I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to get a sharp image. So I'm going to speed that back up. I think 1/60th of a second is okay, but I've underexposed it now. So what am I going to do about that? I am going to change the f-stop. So again, if you remember, I press and hold that little adjustment button, and that will allow me to change the f-stop. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Look, as my f-stop is making my aperture smaller, it's getting darker. So I'm going to open this up. Okay, and there about f5, it looks like it's perfect, right? So that meter is centered. Now, if I turn the camera so it starts pointing at different parts of the room, you can see that that's dark. So if I try to take a picture off into that direction there, there's nothing but dark room. If I tilt up so that the light comes into the picture, suddenly it's overexposed. I've got this pointed straight at the production light that's lighting this side of my face, right? But if I come back here to the center, and if you're looking through the viewfinder, let me turn that display on. Yours will look a little bit different than this, but you can see that menu is still there, that light meter is still there in the bottom right-hand corner. So as I turn over here towards that part of the room, you can see that it's showing I'm very underexposed. If I tilt up so the light is coming straight in the lens, you can see that it shows I'm very overexposed. But if I come back here and frame up my image, it's hard to see because it's on a white background, but that's about perfect. So let me go back to my display on the rear of the camera. I like this one. Okay, so this is telling me it's properly exposed. So 1/60th of a second, f5, ISO 400. I'm going to go ahead and take that picture. All right, let's hit the playback button and see how we did. Hey, that looks pretty good to me. All right. Let me go back to my settings here. Now, and again, these are a dance. If I decided that I wanted to change one of them, I have to change something else, right? So if I wanted to change, and again, I'm going to show you the close-up here. I want to change my f-stop. So again, I have to hold that little button down at the same time I'm turning this wheel, right? So I am going to change my f-stop up to f8. And there's a reason I might want to do that. But you'll see that by changing it to f8, my picture is now underexposed. So I have to do something to make it brighter. Well, I could go with a slower shutter speed, right? But I'd get down to 1/25th of a second. I don't want to use the slower shutter speed, again, because my hands are shaky and I'm worried that there'll be motion blur. So that means I'm going to have to go back into the little menu and use a higher ISO. Let me try ISO 1600. ISO 1600, let me get my framing back. Okay, ISO 1600 looks like I'm actually just a little bit overexposed. So I will make my shutter speed just a little bit faster. I'll take it from a 60th to an 80th. There we go, dead on. So this is a different set of numbers. This is 1/80th of a second, f8, at an ISO of 1600. Let me take that picture. All right, let's take a look at that one. and it looks perfectly good. So let me look at the picture I took before. It also looks perfectly good. So look at that. I have two different pictures that I've taken with two different combinations of settings, and the exposure on both are equally good. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Okay. So this is talking about the relationship between your aperture, which we measure in f-stops, your shutter speed, which we measure in fractions of a second, and the camera sensitivity, which we measure in ISO. You can adjust all three of these, and when you get them all three adjusted to a point where you have a proper exposure, the thing to remember is that that's not the only setting, right? Once you've figured out that sweet spot that all three of them line up, you can change them. As you make the shutter speed slower, the image gets brighter, which means you could turn the ISO down or you could close the aperture. If you decided to open the aperture and let more light through, the image is going to get brighter. You could fix that by either making the shutter speed faster or by making the ISO less sensitive. So these three things are interlocked. You change one, you have to change one of the others, or possibly two of the others. We'll talk next about why you'd want to do that.